We've taken every manager in the Premier League and we've fired them. Pep Guardiola, gone. That might happen in real life soon. Mikel Arteta, see you later. Sean Dyche, back to Burnley. And we have replaced each one of them with a player manager from their team, like Martin Odegaard at Arsenal, Reece James at Chelsea. I mean, to be fair, he's not playing anyways. And Virgil van Dijk at Liverpool. And we're going to go through one season to see which player manager is the best. And there's a couple of things we're going to be looking out for. First, who's the first player manager to get sacked? It happens to a bunch of real managers every season. I imagine there's going to be even more now that they're bad managers. I mean, there's no way they're better than real actual managers, right? We'll also be looking for who plays the best while managing the team, while also handing out an award, of course, for the player that plays the worst while managing their team. And perhaps most importantly, we're going to give out an award for the most creative tactic that a player manager comes up with. And there's a bonus. Right, there's a bonus. We're going to try to find a manager that just doesn't start themselves nearly enough. Now, there's one player that looks like an immediate success as a player manager in the matchup between Arsenal and Brentford. Brentford's manager, Christian Norgard, against Odegaard. You've already met him. Now, this opening match was the treat of the weekend, starting in the 3rd minute with Arsenal, led by their manager, Odegaard, who finds Mikel Merino and picks up an assist. Then in the 10th minute, it's Saka to Odegaard, who does the scoring himself. In 10 minutes, Arsenal's new player manager has a goal and an assist. Clearly, he knows how to get the best out of himself. After a Brentford penalty, Odegaard would pick up another assist by laying up a corner to Gabriel. Taking it to the second half, already 3-1 to Arsenal with Odegaard on 3 goal contributions. And then in the 52nd minute, Odegaard scores again. Gets into a nifty little half space, tidy finish, Arsenal 4-1. But then it was Brentford's captain's turn. Norgard scores a goal late arriving in the box, and it's 4-2. Then a terrible bit of goalkeeping from David Raya sets Brentford up to make it 4-3. The Bees are trying to pull off the unthinkable, but unfortunately they were up against player manager Odegaard, who's unstoppable. 5 goal contributions rounded out by a hat trick on a banger to ice the game in the 90th minute. I mean, you couldn't manage to have a better start than that. For what it's worth, Brentford does score again to make it 5-4 on the opening day to Arsenal. Arsenal would win its next 2 matches as well against West Ham, led by Jared Bowen, of course, and Nottingham Forest, led by Ryan Yates, to be the only team on the top of the Prem with 3 wins from 3 under new leadership. It's probably because they've already discovered the power of loans. I know you've probably been eyeing this shirt up since this video started, but I have great news for you. You can get it right now. The loans drop has been going for the last week and a half, and you might not have known about it until right now, which means you only have a couple of days to get these swagalicious pieces of clothing until they're gone forever. Which means if you're watching this video after the next couple of days, you're out of luck, or loanless, as we say in the business. These clothes were ergonomically designed for football managing by a team of designers led by acclaimed fashionista Zealand Shannon. No idea who that is. But if you check out the link in the description, you can get your own terrifically awesome loans merch. There is one side effect: they may cause you to spontaneously break out in song. Loans! Dang! It's made recording this video 5 times harder, but 10 times more musical. So if you want to be moving as athletically or sensually as that random paid actor that's definitely not me has been doing over the course of this promo, check out the Loans merch drop. We only have a couple days left. But there are some player managers that didn't take advantage of the Loans drop, obviously. Some of them aren't surprising. 0 points after 3 matches for Mario Lemina, the manager of Wolves. The same for Jack Stevens, the manager of Southampton. And Sam Morsey, the manager of Ipswich Town. But there's one club that probably shouldn't have lost its first 3 matches, which means the player manager there is in some hot water. And that's Reece James. In the opening match against Jared Bowen's West Ham, Reece James rolled out a 4-3-3 as a manager and then proceeded to drop a 6.5 rating. The next match against Ryan Yates' Nottingham Forest saw Reece James drop a 6.4 in a loss, with Nicholas Jackson dropping a truly impressive 6.0 in the new system. Then a matchup with Virgil van Dijk's Liverpool that saw João Felix drop a 6.1 up front en route to another loss. Big Verge had an assist in an 8.3. That was somehow scored by Joe Gomez, by the way, because the keeper saved it into Joe Gomez. And there might just be no better way to score your first career goal. I mean, Chelsea was even struggling against Rosenborg, drawing the second leg of their Conference League qualifier and only winning it by 2 goals at home. To be fair, Rosenborg does have an actual manager. Other surprisingly troubled teams include Tottenham, who got only 2 points points from their first 3, led by Son Heung-min. And Crystal Palace only with 1 point, led by Joel Ward. But it's time to advance. Nothing's happening. I'm just waiting for the computer. I don't know why I'm here. And one look at the top of the table reveals that Martin Odegaard's Arsenal is still cooking, but they have company. And that's Manchester City, led by Kyle Walker. Dude, the team parties at his house are gonna be insane. Oh boy. And Kyle Walker's been living up to it as a manager. He's averaging a 7.94 rating, the second best on the team. He has 2 goals and 4 assists in the first 7 matches. And not only is he balling out, he's doing so in a very creative formation. He's going with a 4-3-3 narrow, or a 4-1-2-1-2 as I've called it sometimes. In the game against Tottenham, he assisted Phil Foden and then goes streaking down the wing, gets a pass from Kovacic and scores it himself. All in the first 8 minutes en route to a 3-1 win over Son Heung-min's team. But Son Heung-min is going for it. He's gone with the 5 at the back, 3 in the middle, 2 strikers with Kulusevski and himself up top. The problem is, against Man City, Son dropped a 6.0. And in 6 matches, he's averaging just a 6.8, while Tottenham sit a ridiculous 15th. Look, I love Sonny, but he might be leading the race for El Sacico with 6 points from 6 matches. Fulham, managed by Tom Carney, they're in the bottom 3. They joined Southampton and Wolves. But it's getting sneakily poor from Bruno Fernandes and his Manchester United team. We're on October 1st, and they haven't won a Premier League match since August, including a 3-1 loss against Ipswich. They're also already out of the League Cup to Charlton Athletic. Bruno Fernandes might have scored a penalty during the run of play, but he missed the first penalty of a penalty shootout. His uninspired 4-2-3-1 might not be the answer, especially when you have Lindelof starting at right back. Chelsea rebounded with 3 wins in its next 4 matches after that terrible start, including a win over Manchester United, so Reece James just rallied the boys. But there is one huge surprise. Well, 2. Brentford's in 4th. They gave Arsenal a great game at the start of the season, and they're doing even better now under Christian Norgard. They won 4 straight matches against Ipswich, Bournemouth, Southampton, and then Newcastle. A 4-1 win capped by a goal from the manager himself, Christian Norgard. That's a manager's goal right there. But then in 3rd, it's Everton, led by the inspiring Seamus Coleman. Seamus hasn't even played yet because he starts the season injured, so he's been able to focus on his managerial game and really gotten Everton clicking. They're already out of the League Cup with a loss to Chelsea, but Everton's gone back to the English basics, as the world should be. A 4-4-2 with Armando Broja and Calvert-Lewin up top. Big, meaty men. Also worth a mention, shout out Aston Villa, who has a match in hand that if they win, they could go into 3rd. They're managed by John McGinn, and they're running a formation that's apparently very popular with all these players, the 4-4-2. But the hour is getting late for some of these managers. Our eyes are peeled for the first one to get the sack. And as that clock ticked on, it would be only another month before we saw our first firing. And after a brutal loss against Liverpool on that November 4th night, Son Heung-min was sacked by Tottenham. It was a 1-2 punch, a 3-0 loss at home against Luton Town in the League Cup, and then getting smacked away against Liverpool, with Tottenham firmly entrenched in 15th place. In the final decisive game, Son Heung-min dropped just a 6.3. And maybe the funniest thing about them getting fired as a manager is that they are also released as a player, which means Son Heung-min has been ejected from Tottenham Hotspur, and he's no longer playing for the team. And he wasn't even the only manager to lose his job on November 4th. We had a tie for El Sacico because somebody else lost a match then that has set them back massively. Joel Ward at Crystal Palace. They lost away against Bournemouth after losing on the road against MK Dons in the 4th round of the League Cup in Pens. And in the final 4 matches he managed, including a match against MK Dons, Crystal Palace scored 1 goal. You know, Joel Ward was starting himself at right back. He played all 9 matches and had a 6.57. Tough realizations for Joel Ward. But it would be just 2 days later that our next player manager would get fired. And this time, it was Reece James. And unlike the other 2, this one feels incredibly harsh. It came on the back of 3 consecutive Premier League matches without a win, a draw against Southampton and Newcastle, and then a loss at home against Wolves, which is obviously a terrible result. Reece James continued to play poorly. Also, he had a 6.5 rating in this match, and his 4-3-3 was guys still ineffective, but there's a lot of green here, and the team was still winning. Because of those 3 results, Chelsea was in 14th, and that's why Reece James got the sack. But after he was let go, the caretaker manager has already pulled them up to 7th. So I feel like I would have given him more time. 6 days later, another one of the Big Six fired their manager, and El Sacchico had turned into a complete bloodbath. This time, it was Manchester United's Bruno Fernandes. And this one kind of hurts for him, as he was playing pretty well. He had a 7.13 average rating, 6 goals in 12 Premier League matches. The problem was his team wasn't. They'd gotten off to a bad start. They'd lost on the road against Wolves, and it was a loss away to Tottenham that sunk them down to a point in the league the board could no longer stomach. And even after one more match under the caretaker manager, they're still sitting at 14th in the league, 1 spot ahead of Tottenham. So better than Son Heung-min, I guess. But it was 2 weeks later that the scythe was really broken out and just mowed over these player managers. Because from November 25th to November 26th, 4 managers were fired. First, it was Jack Stevens of Southampton, whose team sat in 18th. And honestly, he was the master of the draw. You kind of have to respect it. They'd drawn the majority of their Premier League matches, but it was consecutive draws with Ipswich, Bournemouth, and Crystal Palace that sunk him. But remember the good times when he drew Liverpool, Manchester United, and Chelsea. Particularly insulting, he dropped a 7.0 in his final match. And it's not like he could do the goal scoring. He was a defender. He was joined on the same day by Tom Kearney. And it was probably because they'd gotten 1 point in their last 5 Premier League matches. But look, they had to play Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester United, and Arsenal in those 5 matches, so that's a little unfair. But there's one award that Tom Kearney was able to lock up instantly. It's the bonus award. The manager that doesn't start themselves. Tom Kearney didn't play a single minute in the league, with him as the head coach. He wasn't injured, and he made 1 appearance in the League Cup where he got a 6.6, and you know what? The coaching part of his brain saw that and realized they would be better off without him. Although maybe they could have used him, honestly. The following day saw 2 more coaches get fired. Unsurprisingly, Wolves decided to part ways with Mario Lemina. To Lemina's credit, he only started himself 3 times. But despite the fact that Wolves seemed to be responsible for everybody else getting fired, they lost every other match. And even though they beat Manchester United and Chelsea, they lost matches to Ipswich, Leicester City, Brighton, and West Ham, and drew Nottingham Forest. That put him in 17th. Honestly, I feel like Wolves probably should have kept him. The other one to lose their job in this bloody weekend was Jamal Lascelles. He'd started himself just 3 times for Newcastle, but they lost away to Bournemouth and the board pulled the plug. But honestly, it's a stretch like that gets you fired. Newcastle sitting in 13th was enough. And we might need to reevaluate the way we're looking at this, because we are at the end of November. 8 of the 20 managers that were assigned at the beginning of the season have already been fired. There are only 12 player managers left. How much will having a real manager help some of these teams? Kyle Walker's torrid start with Manchester City has slowed down massively, with only 1 Premier League win since the start of October. He is still playing amazingly, though, with a 7.6 average rating, so at least he's designed a tactic that helps him. Arsenal is chilling top of the league, with Martin Odegaard having played up to a 7.4 rating to this point of the season. He's in need of a rest, though, so apparently he's overworking himself. I wonder if he's going to go into his office and give him a piece of his other half of his mind. And then, unbelievably, there's Everton, 3 points ahead of Manchester City and running in 2nd place. Seamus Coleman has started to integrate himself into the starting lineup, playing it right back in that big, beefy 4-4-2. And they were just 3 points behind Arsenal till a shock loss at Nottingham Forest. Not really a shock loss, though, because Nottingham Forest is running in 5th. Ryan Yates is doing a bang-up job. The only team in the bottom 8 that still has their manager at all is Ipswich Town. Sam Morsey, I would imagine hanging on by a thread, because these boards are not kind to player managers. To the January transfer window we go. And before that window, only 1 more manager would lose their job. Jared Bowen from West Ham. But Jared's been picked up by Manchester City. Manager Kyle Walker making plays on the transfer market after West Ham let somebody go. And Jared Bowen's not the only manager to have re-signed as just a player. Joel Ward headed to Sheffield United. Son Heung-min was snapped up by big Virgil van Dijk at Liverpool. Reece James headed to RB Leipzig. Jack Stevens signed with Luton Town. Jamal Lascelles is deciding between Preston North End, AZ, or Camber, both in the Netherlands. Bruno Fernandes took the money and went to Al Nassr. He's making over $68 million a year now. Tom Kearney went to Sheffield Wednesday, and Mario Lemina went to Strasbourg. So Jared Bowen and Son Heung-min, the only 2 players to stay in England, signed by fellow player managers, both of them. And the caretaker manager hasn't made things any better for Jared Bowen's West Ham, as they still sit in 15th in the league. The early hype around Christian Norgard and Brentford has faded because they're only right above West Ham in 14th position. And Norgard's incredible start has faded. He hasn't scored another goal and he's under a 7.0 average. But there are now only 11 clubs with player managers. And some of the clubs with caretaker managers coming back in, they've succeeded. Newcastle's up to 4th by the end of January. And they're tied with Chelsea on 40 points. Kyle Walker's Manchester City has gone all the way down to 8th. And not all player managers are bad. Arsenal is flying under Martin Odegaard. And in fact, the only loss they've suffered since August in the league was Everton, away. And that's excusable because Seamus Coleman's Everton are literally in second place. They're flying, and Seamus Coleman's relegated himself to the bench, which is smart because he's only throwing out a 6.69. And he's never deviating from that beefy 4-4-2. Virgil van Dijk's Liverpool deserves credit for being in third because, well, we've seen how hard this is for other player managers to figure it out. And just because we haven't talked about him much, Adam Smith has Bournemouth in 7th. So he might be one of the player managers that survives El Sacico. And we also haven't mentioned Jamie Vardy managing Leicester City yet. He's doing well. They're in 12th. But one of the main reasons they're probably not better is Vardy insists on starting himself in 20 league matches to this point, to the tune of a 6.65 average rating. Better manager than player this year, I'd say. Now, the transfer window is closed. So who are the biggest spenders on the player manager front? Virgil van Dijk dropped a ton of money to get himself a center back partner. He bought Gonzalo Inacio for 64 million. He also bought Frederick Ozerns for 54 million. I just love the idea of buying yourself a center back partner. Kyle Walker brought in Ismail Benasser to strengthen the incredibly valuable midfield in his 4-man midfield. Martin Odegaard brought in Brahim Diaz for a cool 47 million. The one that maybe steals the show. Martin Odegaard bought Gabby Barbosa for 22 million, and that's just the most football manager transfer of all time. But now we fast forward. 10 matches left to play. 11 player managers hanging on desperately to their jobs. And in those first 28 matches, Arsenal has compiled a stunning 71 points. Martin Odegaard's Arsenal have lost one game. That was that match at home against Everton. They have not lost another game in the league. The only other bump in the road really has been the fact they lost their first League Cup match to Jamie Vardy, obviously, in Leicester. But in that League Cup, the player managers would not have a lot of luck. The only player manager that made it even to the semi-final was Kyle Walker, who got upset in the second leg at home against Leeds. The final was a caretaker manager for Reece James who'd been fired, and a rampant Leeds United that won the League Cup from the Championship. I quite frankly am amazed at the severe impact having these player managers has had on these teams. Morsy's the lowest one left at Ipswich. He's in 18th and I would imagine still hanging on to his job. Norgard's Brentford has dropped down to 15th, and they picked up just one win in the last 2 months, and they're already out of the FA Cup too. Ryan Yates's Nottingham Forest have slipped down to 11th, and it's the same old player manager customers that have managed to keep their jobs this far. Brighton's Lewis Dunk, who's been lurking somewhere between 10th and 7th really the entire time. Bournemouth's Adam Smith, Aston Villa's John McGinn, Kyle Walker at Man City, who's pulled his team back up to 5th, by the way. Probably played his team back up to 5th, honestly. But he hasn't scored since early on. He only has 3 assists since the last time we talked about his goal contributions, so I don't know what that start to the season was. And then what is now a runaway top 3, because Man City's on 44 points. Everton's on 59. Seamus Coleman is no joke as a manager. He is unfortunately a joke as a player. He has the lowest average rating on his team of any of the players that have played for this team this season. That is impressive. Liverpool's chilling in second, by the way, 61 points under coach Virgil van Dijk. Now, there are 3 player managers that have navigated themselves to the round of 16 of the Champions League, but based off their other cup performances, I'm not optimistic. Arsenal's up 2-1 against Inter, but because of copyright stuff with Football Manager, now they're Blue-Nary. Man City's up 1-0 against Celtic, and Liverpool's 0-0 with PSV. Don't know what's going on there. But 11 managers still have their jobs as we head to the end of the season. And there will be 2 more managers that couldn't make it to the end of the season, meaning only 9 player managers survived a full season in the Premier League. First to be fired on March 10th, Kyle Walker. Manchester City, being outside the top 4 for that long, finally caught up to the creative manager. It's a shame because he was having a great season. 10 goal contributions and a 7.24. But Man City wouldn't even recover into the end of the season with just 62 points to their name. Then on March 16th, it was Christian Norgard. And it started so well, Christian, but his production on the field slowed down dramatically. And he failed to win any of his last 6 games before getting fired, with Brentford barely surviving relegation because their caretaker manager engineered a cool 9 points on the run-in. Wolves and Southampton, who fired their managers long ago, were relegated alongside Sam Morsey's Ipswich, but because he was battling bravely against relegation into the final day, he's one of the 9 managers to keep his job through the end of the season. Up the table, the next manager to keep his job was Lewis Dunk. Now, unfortunately for Lewis, he was fired 2 days after the season, but because he made it through the end of the season with his job, keeping his team, Brighton, in the Premier League, we're going to count him as one of the 9 survivors. But he had a rough March and April. They lost every game. After that, it's Jamie Vardy at Leicester. Of course, he engineered a 14th place finish, and he ended up averaging a 6.72, which is bad, but not as bad as it was. We're still on the lookout for the player that played the worst, and I think I know who that might be. But also, we need to award the player that played the best and the most creative tactic. As much as I love Jamie Vardy, probably not the 4-4-2. Ryan Yates kept his job at Nottingham Forest, even though they sunk to 13th towards the end of the season. Yates gave Carney a good run for his money, though, because he only played in 3 matches the entire year, with him making the decisions about who was playing. I wonder if he complained to himself. We then go all the way up to 9th to see one of the more successful managers, Adam Smith. He played only 6 matches all year, but he was making the right calls. His tidy 4-3-3 kept Bournemouth competitive. But in the top 8, there would be just 4 surviving player managers, starting with, at 8th, John McGinn, baby. Not only did he get his team all the way to the FA Cup semi-final, but they were higher before 3 straight losses in the league knocked him down a peg. McGinn played himself a ton, although not very well. He only had a 6.76, but the Aston Villa 4-4-2 was back in business. Which brings us to the 3 player managers that really got the job done, because they finished 1, 2, and 3. In 3rd, it was Liverpool, with Virgil van Dijk getting 72 points. It was an amazing collapse. They survived PSV in the round of 16 of the Champions League, but lost 3-1 to Real Madrid. And while they were doing that, they didn't win a match after the 31st of March. I don't know what Van Dijk was cooking, but it was not good. They got 11 points in their last 10 Premier League matches. Van Dijk had him in a 4-2-3-1, but he really didn't play that well. He just 6.92 over the course of the season for a team that finished 3rd. But in 2nd, undoubtedly the award winner for the best player manager, Seamus Coleman with Everton. They had 86 points. And even though they got knocked out of the FA Cup by Norwich, they finished the season with 7 consecutive wins, including Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, and Arsenal. They won 9 of their last 10 matches. All I'm saying is I think Everton should appoint Seamus Coleman as the manager. No offense to anyone. Also, credit has to be given as he recognized he wasn't helping his team win and barely played over the back half of the season, making a total of 16 appearances. But even though he recognized it a little too late. So as the players that played significantly, Seamus Coleman, despite being the best manager, was the worst at playing while he was managing. And then there was Arsenal, who dropped a 93-point season under Martin Odegaard. They did get knocked out by Inter in the Champions League round of 16, and they also failed to win the FA Cup, losing to Chelsea, who had their caretaker manager in charge in the semi-final. But Arsenal was running up the score on everyone, playing out of a dominant 4-3-3 formation. Martin Odegaard dropped a brilliant masterclass with 9 goals and 12 assists in 30 matches to the tune of a 7.32. You know where I'm going with this. He talked the talk and walked the walk. He is the player who played the best under his own management. And that leaves us with the manager that had the most creative tactic, which I'm going to give to Kyle Walker, because honestly, he's the only manager that went with something creative at all that wasn't a 4-4-2, 4-3-3, or 4-2-3-1 basic. And he made it really far. He did end up getting fired, and he also played well. But he gets our Manager Creativity Award. But overall, the takeaway is it's amazing the difference a manager can make. Congrats to our 9 contestants that survived. Remember to grab your Loans merch. You only have a few days left, and be sure to check out this video where we locked Kylian Mbappe in the worst league in the world. And then we did it to Erling Haaland too, because we needed a control group. This is science, after all. Science.